So palm muting is the technique where you use your palm to damp the strings while you're playing the bass notes, while letting the treble notes ring free. And it is the single best way to make sure that you're picking sounds like blues and not like folk music. So in this lesson, I'm just going to show you a way to zero in on how to get the palm muting to work so that you can have that separation between the bass and the treble notes that makes your licks really pop and sound like blues licks over a bass accompaniment instead of just folk finger picking. So I'm doing this lesson in drop D tuning, which just means I've taken the low E string and dropped it down a whole step, retuned it to a low D so it's an octave below the fourth string. And that's just to make it kind of easy to think about doing this alternating thumb pattern between the sixth string and the fourth string without worrying about holding down a chord down here. So there are just 3 steps that we're going to look at for doing this palm muting technique. The first step is to get the thumb out in front of the fingers. The second is to get the palm resting right where the strings meet the bridge. And the third step is just to adjust back and forth until you find the sweet spot where the low strings are damped, but the high strings aren't. So let's go through those one by one. First, we're going to rest the thumb on the sixth string and then rest the index finger on the third string, middle on the second string, ring on the high string. Now, when you just put your fingers down, if you find your fingers are right across from your thumb, they're going to bump into each other when you pick, and it's also going to put your palm in a position where it covers more of the strings than we want. So the first step is to look at that layout with your thumb and fingers on the strings and just slowly move your thumb towards the fingerboard and let your fingers drift back a little bit towards the bridge. And you should end up with a shape more like this, where the thumb is almost straight out and the fingers are curved, kind of like this, still resting on the strings. And now when you pick, they're not going to bump into each other. They're going to each have their own place to go. So you'll be able to pick with more strength. And also at the same time, when we go to do the next step, the palm is going to be in the right position to damp the strings you want to damp. So once you've got your fingers and your thumb laid out like this, you want to rest this part of your palm right where the strings meet the bridge on the low strings. So if you just drop your palm down to the strings, you should be getting this damped effect instead of hearing. So what you want to do is be touching right around here, and you're actually resting your hand maybe around where the pins are in the bridge, but that means that your palm is actually touching the strings themselves. And that should mean that the high strings are still going to sound undamped. And what's going on is that your hand is really in like I suppose classical musicians would consider a terrible hand position, right? It's not arched out like this. It's not, out from the fingerboard or from the strings like this. You're kind of flattened down, and there's almost like a concave situation here at the wrist. And so that should let you get this sound down here, and then these strings ringing out on top. Now, if it's not like that now, then it's time for the third step, which is just to slowly adjust back and forth this way. As you go back this way, you're going to be opening up the strings more, where you can be resting all the way on the back part of the bridge, and you can be picking and basically having the strings ring open as if your hand was up like this. But as you slowly go forward, moving this way, you're going to start to damp the bass notes. Now, if you keep going, you're going to go too far, right? And you don't want this sound. So it's a matter of just kind of experimenting until you find a nice spot where you get some sound of the note, but it's damped. It's a little bit muted, not wide open, and not completely choked off. And you may find yourself picking a little harder to bring the sound out, but it's got this quicker decay and it's not as ringing. That's what you want. And when you're in that spot, you should have the strings open on top, because you're not holding all of this down to the strings as well, right? In fact, you can barely pick when you do that. There should be an effect where if your hand is at the right angle this way, you're getting the damp notes in the bass, but these notes are ringing out. And so you can experiment by rocking this way and this way as well to see if these notes are getting damped as well on top, then you may have to rock your hand back a little bit this way. Of course, if you go too far, things will start to open up again on the fourth string. So when you're doing alternating thumb, then you do need to make sure that you're damped all the way up to the fourth string. And so that's where this kind of rocking experimentation comes in. So you're looking at what's happening this way, and you're looking at what's happening this way. And when you find that spot, you should be able to play and get these notes to sound kind of dry and damped, and get these notes on top to ring out. Not getting them to ring out on top, then go back to this step and to this step to see if you can get it to where those high strings are sounding clear. And the difference between having the damping and not is the difference between having it sound like this background bass line and this melody foreground, and having it just sound like one big picking pattern or arpeggiation. Because if the thumb notes are ringing out, it's a big difference. When you don't have the damping, then all the sounds are equal. The melody notes are equal to the bass notes. And so you don't get this sense of foreground and background. Whereas when you choke the strings back with the palm muting, then you get this sense of the licks are out front and the bass note is just in the background a little bit, supporting them. And to me, anyway, to my ears, that's when it starts to sound more like blues finger picking and less like a folk kind of pattern picking situation. So those are the three steps. First, get your thumb out in front of your fingers. Second, get your palm down where the low strings meet the bridge. And third, make those critical adjustments in all directions until you've got the bass notes nice and thumpy and the top strings ringing out. Now, if you're interested in more ways to transform your finger picking from basic pattern picking and folk playing into full-on blues, finger picking, improvising, playing tunes, and more, I encourage you to check out my membership at the Fingerstyle 5, which you can learn more about at the link below or the link on screen. For the next few months, we're going to be spending a lot of time in drop D tuning, working on building a basic improvisation vocabulary, building up the essential coordination between the thumb and the fingers, and learning some traditional contemporary blues that use those techniques in that key in drop D tuning. So you can check that out at the link below or the link on screen. If you've got a question or comment about today's lesson, I would love to hear from you. Please leave it down below. And as ever, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.